Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into the incredible story of Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon Blue Origin.
Yeah, it's quite a journey. We'll be looking at the key moments, his sort of core ideas, and frankly, some surprising twists. How he went from this really curious kid to, well, a figure who's transformed so much globally.
Exactly. And we've got a lot of material to draw on for this, giving us hopefully a pretty rounded picture of his life and, his impact.
Right. And the goal here is really to pull out the most important stuff, the key insights from his story. Kind of a shortcut, you could say, to understanding what made him tick and the lessons learned.
So maybe you've wondered what really sparks massive innovation,
Mm.
or what keeps a business like Amazon so successful for so long. Bezos's path, it's just full of ambition, execution, and a real appetite for risk. It makes for a fascinating case study.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's maybe start at the beginning.
Yeah, let's do that. Unpack those early years.
Well, what's interesting right away is how his childhood sort of set the stage. He was born in Albuquerque, 1964. His mom, Jackie, was very young, 17, and his dad, Ted Jorgensen, owned a bike shop.
Mm.
But they split up pretty early on.
Right, and that early change, that disruption, maybe it built some adaptability in him, you think, something he used later.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a significant shift early on. Then his mom married Miguel Bezos, who was a Cuban immigrant when Jeff was about 4.
And Miguel adopted him, gave him the Bezos name we all know. The family moved, right, to Houston.
Yeah, Houston, Texas. Miguel is an engineer, worked hard. And that seems to have created a really stable, encouraging home life for Jeff.
So a stable foundation, even after that early disruption.
Absolutely. And crucially, it was a home where education was a big deal, lots of books around, ideas were discussed, debated, and mistakes. They weren't failures. They were seen as like chances to learn. That's pretty powerful.
Nurturing that curiosity from the start.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about reading books. I mean, there are these great stories about him, even as a toddler.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like the one where he apparently took apart his own crib with his screwdriver when he was just 3.
3? Seriously? Why?
Because he wanted to sleep in a real bed. It kind of shows that mindset already, doesn't it? Questioning things, figuring out how to change them. He wasn't just accepting the status quo, even in his crib.
That's amazing. A little engineer already. It points to that desire to build, to solve problems.
Totally. Loved math, science, always wanted to figure things out and, yeah, build stuff.
And then there was his grandfather, Pop. Right. The
Yeah.
summers on the ranch in Texas sound really important, too.
Oh, hugely important. Those summers seem to have given him a whole different set of skills and values. Self-reliance, definitely.
What kind of stuff did he do there?
Practical things, fixing windmills, looking after animals, learning to troubleshoot, think for himself. And maybe the biggest thing was Pop's attitude, this idea that you just don't give up, you keep trying.
That perseverance piece seems key to Bezos's whole story later on.
Absolutely. It feels like it became a core part of how he approached, well, everything.
So taking apart cribs, fixing windmills, you see this pattern emerging, right? Understanding how things work, then trying to make them better.
Yeah, tinkering, building. And it wasn't just physical stuff. Even as a teenager, he was thinking bigger.
Like that summer camp you started, the Dream Institute.
Exactly. For younger kids, focused on science and literature. I mean, that shows leadership early on, right? And his teachers apparently noticed, said he had this real drive, wanted to make his mark.
He wasn't just thinking about himself. He wanted to share that knowledge, inspire others.
Seems like it. And around this time, that fascination with space really starts to develop. It wasn't just a kid's fantasy.
No, it seems like it was deeper than that. He actually talked about it in his high school graduation speech.
He did. Talked about space colonies, the future of humanity needing to expand beyond Earth. He said, The Earth is finite. If the world economy and population is to keep expanding, space is the only way to go. Pretty prescient stuff for a high school kid.
Wow, that's really something. Foreshadowing Blue Origin decades later.
Completely. It shows that long-term thinking was there from very early on.
So all that energy then gets channeled into Princeton, electrical engineering and computer science.
Right. A tough academic environment. He was known for being really focused, intense, serious, but apparently he also had this, really loud, distinctive laugh.
Okay, so not all serious then.
No, but definitely driven. And his choice of major computer science, that shows he already grasped how powerful computers were going to be. That was foundational for what came next.
So looking back at those early years, you've got this incredible mix. The curiosity, the discipline from his family, the hands-on problem solving from the ranch, these huge visions about space, and then the focused academic training.
Yeah, it all comes together. The sources really emphasize that foundation.
Yeah.
Curiosity, discipline, and a fearless heart. That seems like a pretty good summary.
Okay, so he graduates from Princeton armed with all this potential. Where does he head first?
Well, computer engineers were in high demand then. And he had these ideas bubbling away, space hotels, millions living off-planet, computers everywhere. Maybe not things people took seriously back then.
Right, those big futuristic ideas. But he didn't jump straight into that, did he?
No, he took a more, let's say, conventional path initially. Joined a fintech startup called Fitel,
Okay.
then Bankers Trust, and then significantly the hedge fund D.E. Shaw.
Ah, D.E. Shaw. That was a big step.
Huge. He did really well there, rose quickly, became one of their youngest VPs. He was working on computer systems for investments, sophisticated stuff.
And his boss there, David Shaw, he saw something special.
Yeah, recognized his sharp thinking, leadership skills, and that relentless curiosity was still there.
So he's successful, secure, on a great path on Wall Street. But then the internet starts exploding in the 90s.
Right, growing at this insane rate, like 2,000% a year or something. And Bezos saw that, and he didn't just see information sharing. He saw opportunity, something massive.
He saw the potential for commerce, right? Not just communication.
Exactly. He realized this could be a whole new kind of marketplace.
And that leads to the online bookstore idea. Why books specifically? Was it just random?
No, not at all. It was very calculated. Books were kind of the perfect product for early e-commerce.
How so?
Well, think about it. They're easy to ship, relatively uniform, and crucially, there are millions and millions of different titles, way more than any physical store could ever stock.
Ah, okay. The selection advantage?
Exactly. He saw the potential to create the biggest bookstore in the world, online, something physically impossible.
Makes sense. But still, leaving that high-flying Wall Street job, that's a huge leap of faith.
Massive. A huge risk. He talked it over extensively with his wife, Mackenzie, and this is where he developed that famous regret minimization framework.
Right, the what will I regret when I'm 80 test.
Yeah. He basically asked himself, when I'm 80, am I going to regret trying this? And the answer was clearly yes. He'd regret not trying it, even if it failed. The fear of inaction, of that long-term regret, outweighed the short-term risk.
That's such a powerful way to frame big decisions. It really shifts your perspective.
It does. So decision made. They pack up and drive across the country to Seattle in 1994.
And apparently, he wrote the business plan on his laptop in the car during that drive.
That's the story. Talk about a mobile office. He was planning the whole company en route.
Amazing. Did they have the name Amazon then?
Not right away. The first idea was cadabra, like abracadabra.
Cadabra.
Yeah. But someone pointed out it sounded a bit too much like cadaver.
Oh, yeah. Good call to change that.
Definitely. So he went looking for something that suggested scale, something huge and powerful.
And landed on Amazon, like the river.
Exactly. The biggest river in the world. It perfectly captured the sheer scale he envisioned for this online store.
And the beginnings were really humble, weren't they? Literally a garage in Seattle.
Oh, yeah. Classic startup story. Garage famously used old doors for desks. Very bare bones.
I heard about a bell they had.
Yes. A bell that rang every single time an order came in. In the beginning, it was probably pretty quiet, but soon enough, it was ringing constantly.
A good problem to have.
Absolutely. But it meant long hours. Bezos was doing everything, coding the site, packing the books, sometimes sleeping at his desk. Total dedication.
That sheer startup grind. And his core idea was that the internet wasn't just for information.
No, it could be a store, a business, a whole new way for people to live and interact with commerce. He saw that potential very early on.
So he makes this jump at age 30, leaves a top job, driven by this belief in the internet. That takes serious conviction.
It really does.
Yeah.
It shows how strongly he believed in that vision, enough to walk away from a very secure, very successful career.
And that drive to Seattle, planning the business on the way, it's just incredible to think the blueprint for Amazon was hashed out on a laptop during a road trip.
It really is. Then setting up in that garage, no frills, no heat, no AC apparently, just the dream and a ton of determination.
The first website must have been pretty basic compared to now.
For sure. Simple search bar, categories, a shopping cart, the essentials. You hired a small team, people who believed in the vision, and yeah, the servers were right there in the garage with them.
Wow. And from the get-go, that focus was on the customer experience, wasn't it?
Absolutely critical. He knew people were wary of buying online then. It was new, so the site had to be super easy to use, trustworthy.
How did they build that trust?
Things like customer reviews, which were pretty radical then.
Yeah.
Detailed information about the books, making the search work really well. They wanted to feel safe, friendly, smart for people trying online shopping, maybe for the first time.
Then came the challenge of getting funding, right? Pitching this idea of the world's largest bookstore when online shopping was still mostly theory.
Yeah, that must have been tough. Lots of skepticism from investors. People won't buy books online, that kind of thinking. It was hard to convince people this wasn't just a fad.
But he managed it, got about $1 million initially.
Yeah, from family, friends, and a few bold investors who saw the potential. That initial money was crucial to get things properly up and running.
And then Amazon.com goes live July 16, 1995. Must have been a nerve-wracking day.
You have to imagine. All that work, all that risk, and then you flick the switch.
And the reaction was pretty immediate, wasn't it?
Astonishingly fast. Sales in all 50 U.S. states and 45 other countries within the first month.
Wow, in the first month.
Yep. That bell in the garage started ringing. A lot. It was clear validation that people wanted this.
But that kind of rapid success brings its own headaches, right? Suddenly needing more computers, more staff, more space.
Oh, definitely. Scaling up that quickly is a huge challenge. You're constantly trying to catch up with demand.
But Bezos had that long-term view from the start, not focused on quick profits.
No, he was reinvesting everything back into growth. He famously said, "We are not in a sprint. We are in a marathon." That really set the tone. Long-term dominance over short-term gains.
And he stayed deeply involved in everything.
Totally hands-on. Coding, design, marketing, inventory, even packing boxes himself sometimes in the early days. Kept things simple, focused.
Then the media starts noticing, calling it the bookstore of the future. Customers are loving the convenience, the selection.
Yeah, the buzz started building. People realized how much easier it was than going to a physical store, especially for finding less common books.
But the traditional bookstores, the big companies, they must have started getting worried.
Oh, for sure. Amazon was suddenly this major disruptor, a real threat to their established way of doing business.
But Jeff just kept pushing forward with that core belief. Build value for the customer and success follows. And that mantra, it's still day one. Where did that come from?
That became his and the company's guiding philosophy. It means always acting like a startup. Stay hungry, stay humble, stay focused on the customer, never get complacent. Even when you're huge, think like it's the first day.
It's a powerful mindset. Keep that urgency.
Definitely. And it worked. By the end of 96, they had 180,000 customers.
Incredible growth. And then the IPO in 1997, going public, that's a huge step.
Massive. Stock price was $18 a share. It raised much-needed capital for expansion. But, yeah, there were still doubts out there about whether this internet thing would last. But the potential was becoming clearer.
And Bezos himself, suddenly a millionaire on paper, did it change him?
Apparently not much initially. Still driving his Honda, still working crazy hours. The focus remained laser sharp on building the company, being the best place to shop online.
And that willingness to be misunderstood, to take risks, to invest for the long term.
Yeah, we are not afraid to be misunderstood. That was key. They were playing a different game, a longer game than most people were used to. And Amazon was already starting to look like more than just a bookstore. It was becoming a platform.
Right. So 1997, they're public, growing fast, but Bezos isn't thinking just books anymore. He's already got the everything store in his sights. That's a huge shift in ambition.
It is. Books were just the beginning, the wedge to get into online retail. The real goal was always much bigger, a place where you could buy pretty much anything online, leveraging that customer base and the infrastructure they were building.
But moving into new categories, that adds way more complexity, doesn't it?
Right.
Managing all those different types of products, more customers, more orders.
Absolutely. It created huge operational challenges.
Yeah.
Every new category, music, electronics, whatever, meant different logistics, different supplier relationships, different customer service issues. It was a constant exercise in problem solving.
And his solution was basically more tech, build better systems.
Pretty much. Investing heavily in technology, hiring the best engineers, making the website faster, smarter, easier to use, building out the back-end systems to handle the scale. Tech was always seen as the key enabler.
And that obsession with the details comes through again, making sure every click was smooth, pages loaded fast, orders were accurate.
Yeah, he apparently took customer errors or website glitches very personally. That famous quote, "If there's one thing Amazon is about, it's obsession with the customer." That drove everything. Every detail mattered because it impacted the customer.
So the warehouses had to evolve too, right? From maybe chaotic beginnings to something much more sophisticated?
Oh, definitely. Early on, fulfillment was tough. But they started implementing things like barcode systems, better labeling, using algorithms to track inventory and optimize how orders were picked and packed. Again, using technology to solve physical world problems.
But all this growth costs money, and they weren't profitable yet. So you still had investors wanting profits, media being skeptical, competitors trying to catch up.
Right. The pressure was intense. But Bezos just kept hammering that message. It's still day one. It was a way to keep the team focused internally and signal to the outside world that they were sticking to their long-term plan.
So 1998 is when they really start expanding beyond books, music, DVDs, electronics.
Yeah, that was a big move. The everything store started to become a reality. But like we said, each new category brought new headaches, different sizes, weights, shipping needs, return policies.
They must have made mistakes along the way.
Oh, absolutely. But Bezos seemed to view failure as just part of the process. You try things, some work, some don't. You learn and move on. Innovation requires accepting failure.
And that strategy of your margin is my opportunity.
Explain that a bit more. It seems counterintuitive for a business.
It was radical then. Most businesses try to maximize profit margins. Bezos flipped it. He focused on offering lower prices, even if it meant razor-thin margins or even losses initially, to attract customers, build loyalty, gain market share. The bet was that happy customers and massive scale would eventually lead to profits, even with lower margins per item. Prioritize growth and customer happiness over short-term profit. And introducing customer reviews that must have ruffled some feathers.
Yeah, publishers apparently hated it at first. Why allow negative reviews? But Bezos insisted. He argued that honest reviews, good and bad, help customers make better choices. And he was right. It built trust and became a hugely powerful feature.
Empowering the customer again.
Exactly. Same with personalization. Those you might also like suggestions. That was revolutionary back then. Using data to make the shopping experience better, more engaging.
So by the end of 1999, the picture is dramatically different. 17 million customers selling all sorts of stuff. Time Magazine's Person of the Year.
Yeah, the king of online shopping. It was huge recognition. But even then, Bezos was shifting the narrative again.
How so?
He started saying, we are not a bookstore. We are a technology company that happens to sell books.
Ah, that's a fundamental shift. Why was that so important?
Because it redefined their potential. They weren't just retailers. They were a tech company, a logistics company, a data company. It opened the door to everything that came later. AWS, Kindle, Alexa. It changed the whole game plan.
But they were still burning through cash, right? Still not profitable. Lots of critics predicting they'd go bust.
Oh, yeah. The dot-com boom was raging, but so was skepticism about companies that weren't making money. Amazon was spending massively on warehouses, software, talent, taking huge risks.
But Bezos stuck to the long-term plan, believing customer interests and shareholder interests align eventually.
Right. If you're a long-term oriented, customer interests and shareholder interests are aligned. That was his core belief. Build value for the customer, and the shareholder value will follow. Patience was key.
And his leadership style during this time sounds pretty intense. Demanding, asking hard questions, reading customer emails himself.
Yeah, challenging his teams constantly. There's that quote about working with him being pushed into a fast river, you swim fast or you drown. High pressure, definitely. But it clearly drove innovation and execution.
So all those pieces, the vision, the discipline, the customer obsession, they built this foundation from scratch, ready for whatever came next.
Exactly. It laid the groundwork for Amazon to weather storms and become the giant it is today.
Okay, so let's talk about those storms. We enter the early 2000s. Amazon's a big name, yes, but facing real financial trouble after all that spending and still no consistent profit. Doubts were swirling.
Serious doubts. The rapid growth was impressive, but the lack of profitability was a huge red flag for Wall Street. People were asking if the whole model was sustainable. Could they ever actually make money?
And then, bang! The dot-com bubble bursts in 2000? That must have poured gasoline on the fire.
Oh, absolutely. It was a massive shock to the system. Investor confidence just evaporated for internet companies, especially the ones burning cash. Suddenly, survival was the name of the game. Many dot-coms just disappeared overnight.
And Amazon got hit hard, right? The stock price plummeted.
Lost something like 90% of its value from the peak. The media turned really negative. That nickname Amazon.bomb started appearing everywhere. It looked really grim, like this could actually be the end.
A real crisis moment.
Yeah.
But Bezos' reaction seems key here. He stayed calm, focused.
Remarkably so, by all accounts. He apparently told the team, this is not the end. This is the beginning of a stronger Amazon. That kind of leadership under fire is pretty rare. He didn't panic.
Instead, he made some tough calls. Cost-cutting became the priority.
Yeah, really hard decisions. Layoffs, slowed hiring way down, put some projects on hold, focused ruthlessly on efficiency, streamlining the warehouses, improving shipping, customer service, basically, learning to do more with less.
Necessary for survival, I guess.
Uh,
But while they were tightening the belt publicly, they were cooking up something radical behind the scenes.
exactly. Even amidst the crisis, Bezos and a small team were quietly working on this incredibly bold idea, taking all that powerful tech infrastructure they'd built for Amazon.com and renting it out to other businesses.
The birth of Amazon Web Services, AWS.
That's it. Offering cloud computing servers, storage, databases as a utility, like electricity.
Which must have seemed completely bizarre at the time, a retailer getting into enterprise IT infrastructure.
Total skepticism. People were like, what does a bookstore know about cloud computing? It seemed like a crazy distraction from their core business, especially when they were fighting for survival.
But Bezos had that vision, right? Comparing it to electricity, something essential that businesses shouldn't have to manage themselves.
Yeah, he saw the potential for it to become a fundamental utility for the internet age, abstracting away the complexity of managing servers and data centers.
So AWS launches in 2006. How was it received initially?
Slow burn at first. Businesses were cautious. But then, as the benefits became clear, the cost savings, the scalability, the reliability, it just took off, exploded.
And became incredibly profitable, the engine driving so much else at Amazon.
Hugely profitable. It became this massive dominant force in cloud computing globally. And yeah, the profits from AWS gave Amazon the financial firepower to invest heavily in all sorts of other areas, from retail expansion to devices to content.
Around the same time, 2005, they launched Amazon Prime, that annual fee for free 2-day shipping.
Another game changer. Seems obvious now, but it was a bold bet then, giving away fast shipping. But it worked brilliantly.
Why was it so effective?
It fundamentally changed customer expectations. People got used to fast, free shipping.
Yeah.
And it created incredible loyalty. Once you paid for Prime, you were much more likely to buy everything from Amazon. It locked customers in. Bezos understood the power of speed and convenience.
And then the Kindle in 2007, another disruption, this time aimed at their original business, books.
Right. Launching an e-reader when they were the biggest seller of physical books seemed risky. People loved paper books. But Kindle was a hit.
It transformed reading habits, the publishing industry. Again.
Totally. The convenience of carrying a whole library, buying books instantly. It just resonated.
So, through all this, the crisis, AWS, Prime, Kindle, you see this pattern of taking big risks. And not all of them worked out, right? The Fire Phone later on, for instance.
Exactly. The Fire Phone in 2014 was a major flop. Cost them a lot of money. But Bezos framed it as a useful experiment.
Because failure is part of invention.
That was his mantra. Failure and invention are inseparable twins. If you're not failing, you're not inventing enough. You have to be willing to place big bets, knowing some won't pay off. That failure was okay, as long as you learned from it.
Fostering that culture of experimentation.
Yeah, encouraging people to try things, to take risks. And that it's always day one idea becomes even more important here. Even as they got bigger, they needed to keep that startup hunger, that willingness to experiment and potentially fail.
So by the end of the 2000s, Amazon hasn't just survived the dot-com crash, it's emerged stronger, more diversified, a global powerhouse.
Completely transformed. From online bookstore to tech giant, cloud leader, e-reader pioneer. And Bezos himself evolved, too. Not just the founder anymore, but the architect of these complex systems. This unique culture, this vision for the future.
Let's talk more about that long-term thinking. It seems absolutely central to everything Bezos did.
It really is. Probably the single most defining aspect of his philosophy. He wasn't just thinking quarters ahead. He was thinking years, even decades ahead, always focused on building long-term value.
Which is pretty different from how most public companies operate, right? With all the pressure for short-term results.
Exactly. Most CEOs are obsessed with the next earnings report. Bezos seemed remarkably resistant to that. He consistently emphasized long-term customer value in his annual shareholder letters, even if it meant sacrificing short-term profits.
How did he manage that? Communicating it clearly.
Partly, yes. Patiently explaining the strategy, the investments in infrastructure, R&D, lower prices, but also just having the conviction to stick with it, even when Wall Street didn't like it.
And it always came back to the customer, this idea that they're never satisfied.
Yeah, his belief was that customers always want more. Better selection, lower prices, faster delivery. So the only way to win long-term was to constantly invest in giving them more, focusing on speed, scale, technology things customers would always value.
Which required that willingness to be misunderstood.
We're willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. That quote is crucial. It meant pursuing strategies that might seem odd or unprofitable in the short term because he believed they were right for the long run, taking risks that others wouldn't.
And this long-term view affected hiring, too.
Definitely. He wasn't just filling seats. He was looking for people who bought into the long-term mission, who fit the culture, work fast, think big, handle pressure. That famous line, I'd rather interview 50 people and not hire anyone than hire the wrong person fast. Quality over speed.
Building a team for the marathon, not the sprint.
Precisely. And fostering that high-performance culture. Demanding, yes, but also designed to drive invention.
Things like the two-pizza rule, keeping teams small.
Yeah, the idea was that if you couldn't feed a team with 2 pizzas, it was too big. Small teams move faster, communicate better, are more innovative.
And banning PowerPoint, the 6-page memo thing.
Right. Instead of presentations, meetings would start with everyone silently reading a detailed, narrative-style 6-page memo outlining the idea or problem.
Why? What was the benefit?
It forced deep thinking. You had to really understand the issue to write a good memo, and everyone came into the discussion with the same detailed context. It led to better, clearer decision-making, more discipline. No bullet points hiding fuzzy thinking.
Interesting. And that regret minimization framework we talked about earlier, that's another example of long-term thinking applied to big decisions.
Yeah, asking that when I'm 80 question forces you to think beyond immediate fears or pressures and consider the long arc of your life or your company's future.
So by the late 2000s, all this long-term investment is paying off massively. Millions of products, global reach, Prime booming, AWS exploding, new services like music, video, even fresh groceries starting.
Yeah, the flywheel was really spinning. All those different parts were feeding each other, driving incredible growth.
And still, that customer obsession remained the core principle.
Absolutely. Quotes like, we don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help customers make better decisions. Or, we don't work for Wall Street, we work for the customer. That was the North Star.
And you see ongoing long-term bets like Prime Day, the massive build-out of their own delivery network, experiments like Amazon Go Store.
Right, planting seeds, as he'd say. We're willing to plant seeds, let them grow, and be patient. Not all would succeed, but the ones that did could be transformative.
And that's how Amazon became this vast platform, right? Selling, shipping, streaming, computing, touching almost everything.
Exactly. It evolves way beyond a store into this incredibly complex, integrated ecosystem, all guided by that quiet leadership, that long-term vision, and that relentless day-one drive.
So Amazon starts as a bookstore, becomes the everything store, and then in the 2010s, it feels like it becomes something even bigger, just woven into the fabric of daily life.
That's a great way to put it. It wasn't just a website anymore. It was a trusted utility for millions. Fast shipping, easy returns, prime benefits extending into groceries, entertainment. It became deeply embedded.
And Bezos's vision kept expanding too, seeing Amazon not just as retail, but as this broader tech, logistics, and media company.
Yeah, the ambition never stopped growing. He saw the potential to leverage their core strengths, technology, logistics, customer data in all sorts of new ways.
And AWS just kept growing like crazy during this time, right? Powering huge chunks of the internet.
Phenomenal growth, powering massive companies like Netflix, Airbnb, even government agencies like NASA. It was, as you said, the incredibly profitable secret sauce funding so much of Amazon's other ambitions.
Including things like Amazon Studios, making movies and TV shows. That seemed like a left turn for a retailer.
It did seem odd to some, but it was strategic. They saw the future of content delivery was online, and original content made Prime membership even stickier, more valuable. Winning an Oscar for Manchester by the Sea in 2017 showed they were serious.
So Prime Video wasn't just an add-on. It was a key part of keeping people locked into the Amazon ecosystem.
Exactly. Loyalty through entertainment alongside the shipping benefits.
Then came Alexa and the Echo in 2014. Voice computing, another big bet.
Huge. Met with some initial, what is this for, skepticism, but it caught on incredibly fast, put Amazon right in the center of the smart home, and crucially, made shopping even easier. Just ask Alexa.
Hands-free commerce. Very clever.
Very. Then the massive acquisition of Whole Foods in 2017, $13.7 billion, their biggest purchase ever.
What was the thinking there? Bridging online and physical retail?
Yeah, huge move into physical grocery stores.
Yeah.
Combining Amazon's online power with Whole Foods' physical footprint and brand reputation, especially in affluent areas, gave them hundreds of prime physical locations instantly.
And all through this, that relentless experimentation continues. One-click ordering seems quaint compared to drones and cashierless stores.
Right. They just kept pushing, trying new things, seeing what worked, embracing the idea that innovation requires constant trial and error.
Even with big failures like the Fire Phone, they learned from it.
That was the narrative. Bezos said, if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time if they're going to work. The lessons learned from the Fire Phone failure arguably helped inform the success of Echo, which launched the same year.
Wow, same year. That's resilience.
It shows they weren't afraid to keep swinging big even after a miss.
And the expansion just continued, right, into healthcare with Amazon Pharmacy building their own massive delivery network, deeper into AI, fashion.
It became this sprawling ecosystem.
Yeah.
Shopping, watching, listening, reading, even talking to your house, often all within Amazon's sphere of influence.
And Bezos himself, still driving, still focused on the next big thing. And increasingly, that focus was turning towards space.
Yeah. That childhood dream was becoming a very serious, very well-funded reality with Blue Origin.
Let's talk about Blue Origin. This wasn't just a whim, was it? It goes way back to his childhood, science fiction, Star Trek.
Deep roots, a lifelong passion. He quietly founded Blue Origin way back in 2000 with this incredibly ambitious mission to build a future where millions of people can live and work in space.
Secretive at first, right. Working away in West Texas.
Very much so. Deliberately low profile, focusing on experimentation, learning, getting the technology right without a lot of public pressure. Kind of like the Amazon garage days, but with rockets.
And their logo, the feather, what's the symbolism there?
It represents lightness, freedom, the power of flight, ties into their vision of making space travel safe, affordable, and crucially, reusable.
Which was a radical idea back then. Space was mostly governments, huge aerospace companies. A private individual doing this drew skepticism.
Oh, tons of skepticism. Again, that theme of being misunderstood. Could a private company funded by one guy really compete in such a complex, expensive field? Many doubted it.
And his reason for doing it wasn't just adventure, it was this bigger vision about protecting Earth.
Yeah, that was his core argument. Earth's resources are finite. To protect the planet long term, humanity needs to expand outwards, move heavy industry off-world, tap into space-based solar energy, eventually build space colonies, leaving Earth for, as he put it, residential and light industry.
That's a truly massive, almost science fiction level vision.
It is very long-term, very ambitious.
So while Amazon was conquering e-commerce and cloud, Blue Origin was making quiet progress, testing rockets.
Steady progress, lots of testing, small rockets first. There were failures, definitely, but also key successes, building knowledge incrementally.
Until that big breakthrough in 2015, landing a rocket booster back on Earth.
That was huge, a historic moment. Launched a rocket to space and then landed the booster vertically intact, ready to be reused. It proved their core concept of reusability was viable. Changed the game.
And then they unveiled New Shepard, named after Alan Shepard, aimed at space tourism.
Exactly. Designed for shorter suborbital flights, taking paying passengers just past the edge of space to experience weightlessness, see the curve of the Earth, making that sci-fi dream accessible.
Still face skepticism, though, about space tourism being a real market.
Yeah, questions about safety, cost, demand. But they kept testing, refining.
Until July 20, 2021, the first crewed flight, with Bezos himself on board.
Along with his brother Mark, Wally Funk, one of the pioneering female aviators, and a young Dutch student, Oliver de Damon. A huge moment.
The successful flight.
Yep, about 11 minutes. Up past the Kármán line, the edge of space, experienced zero gravity, saw the view, landed safely.
And Bezos' reaction?
Best day ever. Pure joy. But almost immediately followed by, we're just getting started. Typical Bezos celebrating the milestone, but instantly looking ahead.
Because Blue Origin's mission is bigger than just tourism, right?
Yeah, much bigger. Tourism is maybe step one. The real goal is building the infrastructure, the road to space, as they call it. Developing larger rockets like New Glenn for orbital flight, planning space stations, building a lunar lander for NASA's Artemis program. It's about enabling that long-term vision of millions living and working in space.
And there's the whole dynamic with SpaceX and Elon Musk. A rivalry.
Yeah, definite competition, yeah.
Yeah.
Different approaches. Sometimes Musk focused on Mars, Bezos more on building the infrastructure closer to Earth first, but both are undeniably pushing commercial spaceflight forward dramatically. Healthy competition, maybe?
And Bezos is pouring billions of his own money into this. He called it the most important work I'm doing.
Yeah, truly believes in it. And since stepping down as Amazon CEO, he's had even more time and energy to focus on Blue Origin. It feels like he's really leaning into that foundational dream now.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. By 2021, Bezos isn't just the Amazon guy. He's this global figure with immense influence. What about his leadership style, the lessons, his overall legacy?
Well, he's definitely left a huge mark. His leadership style is often described as relentless, intense.
Asking the tough questions. High pressure.
Yeah, constantly probing, why are we doing this? Is this really helping the customer? Setting incredibly high standards, valuing excellence, effectiveness, maybe over being universally liked or making people comfortable.
And his decision-making framework. Type 1 versus type 2.
Right. A key concept. Type 1 decisions are the big, strategic, hard-to-reverse ones like acquiring Whole Foods. Those require deep thought, analysis. Type 2 decisions are smaller, faster, easily reversible, like testing a new website feature. He encouraged people to make type 2 decisions quickly, without tons of bureaucracy. Don't be afraid to experiment if you can easily undo it.
Makes sense. Keeps things moving. And that principle, invent and simplify.
Core to Amazon's culture. It wasn't just about inventing brand new things, but also taking existing ideas and making them radically simpler, better for the customer. One-click ordering is the classic example, taking friction out of the process.
And always, always thinking long term. Building those flywheels we talked about. Customer obsession at the center.
That relentless customer focus. The most important single thing is to focus obsessively on the customer. That drove the flywheel. Lower prices bring more customers attract more sellers mean better selection, which brings more customers. It's a self-reinforcing loop built around customer value.
When he stepped down as CEO in July 2021, putting Andy Jassy in charge, it wasn't really stepping away entirely, was it?
No, he became executive chairman, still involved at a strategic level, but freeing himself up to focus more on Blue Origin, the Washington Post, which he owns, and his philanthropic work.
Like the Bezos Earth Fund for climate change and the Day One Fund for homelessness and education.
Right. Shifting his focus, but still very much engaged in these big long-term projects.
So his legacy, it's not just about the money, is it? It's the reach.
Exactly. How he changed commerce, technology, cloud computing, reading habits, maybe even space travel. He inspired so many entrepreneurs. His principles are taught everywhere. But it's also complex. There are legitimate controversies and criticisms about Amazon's work culture, its market power, its impact on small businesses. That's part of the legacy, too.
And that willingness to be misunderstood seems like a thread running through it all.
If you want to be understood all the time, don't do anything new. That really sums up his approach to innovation. You have to be willing to go against the grain.
Let's revisit some of those key quotes. They really crystallize his thinking. Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah, emphasizes reputation, trust. It's not about what you say, it's about what customers experience and tell others.
We are stubborn on vision. We are flexible on details.
That's about having a clear long-term goal, but being adaptable in how you get there. Strategy versus tactics.
If you double the number of experiments you do per year, you're going to double your inventiveness.
Pure commitment to experimentation. More tries equals more potential breakthroughs. Volume matters in innovation.
It's not an experiment if you know it's going to work.
Embracing real risk. True experiments have uncertain outcomes. That's where learning happens.
I'd rather interview 50 people and not hire anyone than hire the wrong person.
Prioritizing quality and cultural fit in team building above all else. 8 players only.
I believe you have to be willing to be misunderstood if you're going to innovate.
We keep coming back to this one. It's fundamental to his approach. Don't fear being unconventional.
And finally, what's dangerous is not to evolve.
The imperative to keep changing, keep adapting. Complacency is death in the long run. Constant reinvention is necessary.
So reflecting on all that, he's a complex leader, isn't he? Admired, criticized, valued effectiveness, maybe over being popular, pushed boundaries constantly.
It's definitely complex.
Right.
Driven, demanding, visionary. Empower people but held them to incredibly high standards. And his ambition just kept expanding from books to everything and then literally to space.
So, final thoughts. A man who genuinely changed the world, built Amazon to solve customer problems, focused on making lives better through innovation, took huge bets. What are the big takeaways for us?
I think it boils down to a few key things. Think big and think long term. Obsess over your customer, innovate relentlessly through experimentation, and be okay with failure. Build a great team, and never stop evolving.
And that day one mentality suggests his story isn't really over yet, right? His influence, his legacy, it's still unfolding.
Absolutely. Especially with Blue Origin and his philanthropic work ramping up. It really does still feel like day one in many ways for his broader impact.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive on Jeff Bezos, we've seen this incredible journey fueled by curiosity, that unwavering long term vision, the customer obsession, embracing risk, learning from failure, and just relentlessly pursuing innovation.
Yeah, his story really brings those principles to life. It offers so many valuable insights no matter what field you're in.
And maybe something for you, our listener, to think about. Which of Bezos's core ideas, that long-term focus, the customer obsession, maybe the way he viewed failure, which one resonates most with how you approach challenges or think about your own future? Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.